It started with the walls. At first, they were just that, plain, painted surfaces separating one room from another. But then, the whispers began, faint at first like the rustle of paper or the distant murmur of a conversation, just out of reach. The kind of sound you'd think you imagined if it wasn't so persistent. Jack had lived in that house for years. It was an old place, full of creaks and groans, with wooden floors that seemed to sigh under the weight of the years. It had character, he always said, but lately that character felt darker. The corners of the room seemed to stretch just a little too far into shadow. The air felt heavier, more oppressive, as if the walls themselves were closing in. At first, Jack thought it was just his mind playing tricks on him. Stress from work, lack of sleep, it could be anything. But the whispers, they grew louder, more distinct. He could hear them in the dead of night, when the world was silent and the only sound was his own breathing. But these whispers, they weren't just sounds. They felt intentional, as if someone or something was speaking just for him. The whispers followed him from room to room, never loud enough to understand, but never quiet enough to ignore. Jack tried to shake it off. It's nothing, he told himself, just the house settling. But as the days passed, the whispers became more frequent, more insistent. They seemed to come from the walls themselves, as if the house was alive and trying to tell him something. Jack's unease grew. He started to notice other things, small things at first. A door left ajar when he knew he'd closed it. A book moved from one side of the table to the other. But then the shadows, they started moving. At first it was just a flicker at the edge of his vision, something that could easily be dismissed as a trick of the light. But soon they became more pronounced, dark figures that seemed to dance just out of reach, disappearing whenever he tried to focus on them. Jack couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Even in the middle of the day, with the sun streaming through the windows, the house felt wrong, like it was hiding something. He tried to keep himself busy, tried to ignore the growing sense of dread that gnawed at the edges of his mind. But the whispers, they were relentless. One night, unable to take it any longer, Jack set up a tape recorder in the living room. I'll catch them, he thought. I'll prove I'm not crazy. He let the recorder run for hours, hoping to capture the whispers, to have some evidence that he wasn't losing his mind. But when he played back the tape, all he heard was his own voice. The recording was bizarre. It wasn't just random mutterings. It was a coherent, if nonsensical, commentary on his daily life. Remember to water the plants, his voice said, though he had no plants. The sky is upside down today, it continued, followed by a laugh that sounded eerily like his own, but twisted, distorted, as if someone else was using his voice. Jack's laughter echoed through the empty house, a hollow sound that sent chills down his spine. It was the kind of laugh that hides the terror just beneath the surface. A laugh that says, everything's fine, when nothing is. The absurdity of the situation would have been comical if it weren't so terrifying. He started seeing things that couldn't possibly be real. His cat, normally silent and aloof, began speaking to him in riddles. Why do you listen to the walls, Jack? It would say, its eyes glinting with a knowing look. They have secrets, but not for you. The clock in the hallway spun backward, its hands moving with a speed that made his head spin. And the mirror in the bathroom reflected not his image, but something else, a twisted version of himself, laughing, grinning madly, mocking him. But the worst was yet to come. Jack had always been a rational man, someone who prided himself on his logical mind. But logic had no place in the nightmare his life had become. His paranoia grew, feeding off the strange events, spiraling out of control. He barely slept, haunted by the whispers that never ceased, by the shadows that seemed to grow bolder with each passing day. Then he found the door. It was hidden behind the wallpaper in the hallway, a door he'd never noticed before. It was small, almost childlike in size, with a rusted handle that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. Jack stared at it, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew somehow that this door was the source of the whispers, the shadows, everything. But the thought of opening it terrified him. For days he avoided the door, pretending it wasn't there, telling himself that if he just ignored it, it would go away. But the whispers, they grew louder, more insistent, drawing him to the door like a moth to a flame. He couldn't resist. One night, driven by a mix of fear and curiosity, Jack finally opened the door. It creaked ominously as it swung open, revealing a narrow staircase that led down into darkness. The whispers were deafening now, a cacophony of voices all speaking at once. But still, he couldn't make out a single word. The stairs seemed to go on forever, spiraling downward into the blackness. Jack's breath came in ragged gasps as he descended, the air growing colder with each step. When he finally reached the bottom, he found himself in a room that shouldn't exist. A room that was impossible. It was filled with strange objects, things that defied explanation. A chair with too many legs standing in the corner. A painting on the wall that seemed to change every time he looked at it, shifting and twisting in the dim light. And in the center of the room, a clock with no numbers, just a single, ticking hand that pointed nowhere. Jack's mind raced, trying to make sense of what he was seeing, but nothing made sense. The room was a nightmare, a place where the laws of reality had been twisted and broken. The whispers were all around him now, so loud they drowned out his thoughts, filling his head with their maddening chorus. He had to get out. He turned to leave, but the door was gone. The staircase was gone. The room had changed while he wasn't looking, closing in around him, trapping him. The walls seemed to pulse with a life of their own, breathing, whispering, mocking. Jack screamed, a primal, desperate sound that echoed through the room, but the walls only whispered back, louder and clearer than ever. "You can't leave, Jack. We won't let you." His scream faded, swallowed by the darkness as the walls closed in, leaving nothing behind but the echoes of his voice.